Welcome back to another episode of Toxiris Thoughts. There are 7 rappers that drop trash albums back to back. Let's get into it.
It's the game, we done came on. The game.
Before we start this video, I gotta tell y'all the story how I got this idea. So, I recently had a little exchange of words with the man Amir, who made a post on IG asking people to name rappers that had back-to-back trash albums. I responded like this, and he was like, yo, make a video about it. You see what I thought about the idea of making that video. You are watching it right now. Anyway, let's get into it. I picked 7 simply because even though I could have named a couple more, like for example the posthumous runs that Pop Smoke or X had, I decided, first of all, to include only really good examples, like not albums where I'm like not too sure on, and second of all, to only include examples where the releasing artist is or was still alive when the albums got released. Let's get into it. As the first one, I picked a name that I already included in my comment, Lil Vert. Yes, I am talking about his most recent run of projects, including Eternal Take and Pluto vs. Baby Pluto. I already talked about both of these projects on the channel, but just to narrow it down to a couple things, I hate both of them for their not only repetitive sounds, boring verses, and bland production, but also for both of them, mainly Eternal Take, there was a huge pre-release hype, which at the time was totally understandable. I mean, because Uzi's last album, Love Is Rage 2, was a classic, and he had been teasing Eternal Take since then. Well, it was a disappointment, and since then, I am still waiting for a good Uzi project to drop. As a second one, I picked an artist that most of you probably wouldn't expect on a list like this, especially not on mine. It is the man, PMB Rock. Now, for people that don't know, I am a pretty big fan of him, and I even got clowned for often including him in my videos. These recent 2 projects just sucked. He has been teasing his sophomore studio album #TBH for a while now, so I was kinda excited to see him teasing a new EP called To Get You Through the Rain. It is a pretty common practice to drop a short little EP before you drop a huge studio album, just to build up excitement and hype for the final release. But, well, this EP had 2 good tracks, 2 absolutely awful sounding ones, and a single that had been out for quite some time already. Disappointment, but I mean, I gave him a pass. Well, that was until he suddenly dropped SoundCloud Days, a mixtape that featured a lot of pop and underground rappers, while PMB did his best at trying to impersonate their style and maybe get some hype off of that. The result was an awful sounding, lyrically empty project that is too bad to even take up space in the vaults of any rapper. 12 tracks of total disappointment. And now I even have difficulties being hyped for anything this man is going to release in the future. I hope he gets back to where he was at. Then we get to Lil Baby. This is the only rapper where I didn't use the most recent albums because those were actually pretty solid. I am talking about his first 2 albums. Yes, I know that might be slightly unfair. He was just getting started rapping. Do I really care? Nah, because those 2 albums suck on a new level. Perfect Timing was his first mixtape that, besides featuring performances where he seems like an insecure 7th grader, beats that sounded like they were 100% free beats from YouTube, and absolutely awful sounding hooks, also featured a cover art that should have been burned in a cold Atlanta night rather than released on major streaming services. After that, he dropped Too Hard, the first project of his Hard series, as I like to call it. Well, there isn't that much to say about this project other than just stating how bad it is. It is bland, boring, and offers not much of interesting stuff. It does have a couple okay tracks though. At least the cover art got better on this one. 2 albums, both ass. Let's move on to the next artist. Trippy Red, or as I like to call him, if quantity over quality was a person. This man has not dropped a listenable project since the release of A Love Letter to You 4 Deluxe. While Pegasus was just excruciatingly long and bland, Trip and Night was a horrible attempt at jumping on the current hype around rage beats and the whole SoundCloud underground scene bubbling since 2020. He even featured some of the biggest names of that movement on his album. Both Fago and Playboi Carti did a good job at outshining Trippy on his own tracks. being some of the only upsides to this album. It is almost entertaining how similar, quote unquote similar, each beat sounds throughout the track list. And yes, I do know you can't have as big as a variation on that type of production as you might have on other projects. That doesn't excuse this lazy ass beat selection and these mid bars delivered over them. I am currently just waiting for Trippy to drop another overblown mid album just so I can appreciate the good old days of A Love Letter to You 3 and Life's a Trip even more. Well, we get into the next artist, and I think most people will agree on this one. It's Drake. Back to another rapper that I had already mentioned in my comments. I don't think I have to explain my hatred for CLB, but just because it's so satisfying, I will anyway. This album manages to lyrically be under Drake's standards, which, given what he has released over the course of his career, were not that high. I throw in a couple examples on the screen for you so you can see what I'm talking about. And although there are some pretty good sounding tracks, they all get drowned in awful sounding singing that couldn't even be saved by some pretty good features like Travis and Cudi. But enough about CLB, let's get to the second part of this dynamic duo from hell, Dark Lane demo tapes. Although I feel like I don't despise this album as much as many do, it obviously still is a very underwhelming Drake project, with some tracks that should have never seen the light of day. Besides Fabio and Giveon, not even the features were good on this one. Though overall, I have to say, it might be a better project than CLB. And even though Dark Lane demo tapes can really be considered an album as you might imagine it, I still think it makes this duo eligible for a list like this one. The second to last one, and the most relevant one, Fetty Wap. I'm going to keep this one really short because if you want a more in-depth description and explanation as to how and why these two projects, Butterfly Effect and mainly You Know the Vibes, are trash, just click the info card I just pinned for you. Here, I'll just state that they are both boring, lacking content, and that Butterfly Effect, while showing small tendencies to a better Fetty Wap, is still a pretty bad album. Last, and probably also least, we have our HIV-loving toddler, aka the baby. Many people asked him to switch up after Kirk sounded like he forgot to do his homework, so he had to just copy off of Baby on Baby. He did on Blame It on Baby, partially. Some tracks still sounded like the old Baby. And a couple of the more melodic songs didn't even sound that bad. Rockstar and Find My Way were pretty enjoyable to me, but yes, that's mostly it. Not that many good sounding tracks on that album. I mean, besides a couple good ones off of Kirk, the baby was never the man you would listen to for any substance, so I wasn't even expecting that. It was still a pretty big disappointment that is proven by how forgotten this album is already, although it has a massive hit and was released not even 2 full years ago. Forget is a good word, because that's exactly what his collab album with NBA Youngboy will be soon. I have rarely heard any musical pieces that sounded this unimportant, forgettable, and irrelevant off the rip. This project is not downright bad though. I think mid describes it the best. It is too bad to be remembered positively, and slightly too good to be remembered as an extraordinary failure. So it will not be remembered for anything, besides the fact that, oh, the baby and Youngboy had that collab album, remember? Pretty ironic how this shit is titled Better Than You. That being said, what do you think about these projects? What would be some 2 project runs where your favorite rapper fucked up? Let me know in the comments. And with that being said, have a great one. Thank you for watching.
Remember back then, all them hoes ain't want me. Now I'm ballin', all them same hoes on me. Mama told me that this came with the money and the motherfucking fame. Even though I feel the same, I'm that nigga now. I'm that nigga now. I'm that nigga now. I'm that nigga now.